Y'all, we talking about relationships, and I did good. My Lord, I did good. Thank you,
Praise
Jesus.
the Lord.
I feel the Holy Ghost right now. But we also have Dr. Andy Yarborough, who I'd like to invite out. Dr. Andy, would you come join us out? Come on, give it up for Dr. Andy. You're a good man. You're a good man. I'll tell you how good of a man Dr. Andy is. He was with me yesterday cheering on Windsor in the nasty weather, not because I asked him. He wanted to come. You part crazy, too, but we love you. Hey, have a seat. Let's dive in because time is of the essence, and I want to make the most of our time. And I love our first service today was so powerful. We had such incredible feedback from just the conversation that we had during our time. Talk to us a little bit, Dr. Andy, really. You know, I'll let you take the lead on this question, Cassidy, just about, where you started.
Yes. Well, first of all, welcome. We are super honored to have you.
It's so great to be here. Thank you. I love you guys. Listen, let me say real quick, I want to interrupt. I want to honor your pastors. Man, I love you guys. You wonder sometimes why people who are coming in to serve you do this, but it's because your pastors are worthy of honor. And when they bring in somebody like me, they really care about your health. And they want you to thrive as a whole person. And so I love you guys and would tell you thank you. It's a sacred spot up here, so I thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Yeah.
We're so honored to have you. But I think a great place to start, and this will apply to everyone in the room, is when did you know you wanted to be a psychologist? Like, how did you find that sense of calling, and how did the calling develop?
Right now. Congratulations, guys. You're my guinea pigs. I'm kidding. Sorry, I'm cracking myself up.
Those are LSU jokes. Mom, we're sorry. I mean,
us Louisiana people are weird, man. You know how you get something in your head and it's funny to you, but no one else knows what you're laughing about? I'm having that moment right now, so I'm just pulling it together. It was actually a trip to India. So I was 19 years old. My dad's a pastor. My brother's a pastor. My father-in-law's a pastor. My brother-in-law's a pastor. I've been on staff at churches from leading song worship and setting up in gyms to larger churches and just all over the place. And so I grew up in church. But my senior year in high school and my freshman year of college, I was a bit disoriented. I got injured. I was a basketball player, got injured, messed up some things for me. And so I go to Mississippi College, and I was 18, 19 years old, and I got invited to on a mission trip to play basketball in India. That we were playing their national teams, junior national teams, universities, like all just really cool stuff. And they're like, "You want to go play basketball and tell people about Jesus?" And I was like, "You're an idiot." No, what are you talking about? Go to India? I'd never been out of the country before. And before I knew it, I'm getting off a plane in southern India playing basketball, telling people about Jesus, and that trip messed me up in a great way, but it put me into a severe depression. I saw some significant trauma. I'm 19 years old. I saw the human trafficking industry with my eyes for the first time, and I just had no framework for it, and so I almost failed out of college. I don't know if I should be telling you that, but I almost failed out of college because I couldn't handle it, and my school was like, "Hey, we're going to work with you. Let's figure this out." And so this one question that kept driving me is, what does it mean to worship God even when we suffer? Because suffering's never the end for the believer, but there's a reality to it. And so I'm leaning into this question, and I had a mentor that just started guiding me. He was a psychologist, and he was like, "Hey, you should consider psychology." And what I realized was that was the point in which God started preparing me for my calling, because the word calling means invitation. That's what it means. And a lot of us think because I'm called, I should be doing it right now. The problem is if you try to do something that you're called to when you're called to do it, you may inadvertently sabotage it because you'll despise the time you need to prepare for it.
Wow.
Y'all better be taking notes, fam.
Preparation is very important. And I'm 45 years old. I'm still young, but I'm no longer the young guy in my field anymore, right? I'm on the front porch of my calling because I think of the preparation. And so that was when I felt the invitation from God, and I've been in that prep period since.
I love that, and what you do for the body of Christ, and I love, you and I have been together enough, I love how you point everything is spiritual based with you, and I think that's such a powerful base to have, especially doing what we do. We believe that, but it's wonderful, somebody in your field, to have that deep understanding and knowledge, and everything you do flows from that, as we'll see today. But let's talk about healthy relationships. You said something kind of as a passing comment on Friday night in our marriage night that I want to lean into for a moment. And I'm not going to quote you directly because it's probably not exactly what you said, but the idea of what you said was something like this, is that healthy relationships and marriages aren't found in marriage counseling. And when you said that, I thought, you're wrong. On the surface level, I didn't know if I agreed with that. And then you explained what you meant. And I had this thought, I'm like, well, Brad, you are wrong. Because what he said is 100% accurate. And you went on, and I want you to kind of develop this over the next few moments, but you talked about healthy relationships don't start while we're working on the two of us, so to speak. Healthy relationships start well before that. In fact, healthy relationships starts with a healthy me. Yeah. And start with that framework, what you meant by that, and kind of explain that, because I think it's a powerful genesis to this conversation.
Well, in our culture, if you notice, everybody wants to change the systems they're in. We want to change our community systems, our social systems. We want to change our marriages, which, by the way, it's always our spouse's problem, right? Yeah. I'm just kidding. I've been married, this July will be 23 years. We've got 3 kids. Shout out to my wife, Melody. And my kids, thank you for supporting me to be here. I love you guys. But yeah, we want to change the system. The problem is, when those systems actually change, if we're not paying attention to ourselves, then we don't have the character to sustain or steward the power that we now have in the system we just changed. Wow. And so we end up perpetuating the very problem that we were trying to overcome. That same thing is true in marriage. It's true in God's kingdom. God's kingdom is a system, and it's meant to be transcultural, transgenerational, trans everything, in the sense that God's kingdom is meant to govern and be the vision for our existence. And we are outposts of his kingdom, but God doesn't start with the kingdom. He starts with the heart. He starts with the one. Salvation, if you think about salvation is holistic, right? So there's 3 parts to it. So salvation itself is justification, where your spirits are made right in relationship with God and your past is washed in the blood of Jesus. And then there's this thing called glorification. For those who've been justified, they've also been glorified. So in God's mind, it's this done deal. And that's when we get new bodies. Come on, somebody. Yeah. We get brand new bodies.
6-pack? Oh.
Yes. Rocking and rolling. God cares about the embodiment of his people. He sent a body to redeem a spiritual issue. Theologically, but he cares about the bodies. And then there's this thing in the middle that most of us, I'd say all of us don't like. It's sanctification. And it's a lifelong process of being shaped into the image of Jesus. That has to do with our souls and our relationships, how we reach out. So if salvation is holistic, a biopsychosocial spiritual process, when we take care of ourselves in those areas, that is what it means to work out our salvation. Self-care is not the mission for the Christian. It's a strategy to accomplish the call of God on your life, the invitation, stewarding our health. And so it's not selfishness. Self-care is actually stewardship. It's an act of worship. And it is self-leadership, which is as biblical as it gets. While we don't work for our salvation, we do work it out, and there's a part that we play. And so I have to start with me. I have to know what I am bringing to the table and take ownership for my part in the systems I'm in, and that includes marriage.
Okay. So if I'm hearing you correctly, I'm playing counselor on you right now. Okay.
Where's your couch?
Yeah, exactly.
Tell me how you feel about that.
So could this be, relationship that's struggling, we go straight to marriage counseling, and we're hoping and praying and believing that the marriage counseling is going to be the thing that changes our marriage. And again, it could be a tool for that for sure. But what I feel like you're saying is that you're going to find yourself right back in this same situation. Chances are, if that's all you do, because the underlying issue is probably greater than what you're discussing with the marriage counselor, the issues that you and the underlying is something going on in my world. And if I don't fix what's going on in my world, we don't have a basis for a healthy you and I to build on.
As a psychologist, I'm always wary if someone comes in my office and they only talk about changing the marriage or the system, but they never talk about their responsibility in it. You can't, because you can't trust what they're saying.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I don't care about them or love them and want to walk with them into health. It just simply means that person's not willing to take ownership for their part, even if it's 2%.
And correct me if I'm wrong. Again, obviously, no behavior justifies certain actions outside of marriage. So understand where I'm coming from in that. But what you're saying is that we all have a part. And being willing, if you don't take ownership for your part, it's really hard for a healthy relationship to flourish. Wow. Y'all gonna have to go back and watch YouTube a lot. I'm telling you. I'm glad we get to do this 3 times a day because it's going to take that long for me to digest this. Okay, so let's look at this because, and I love how I think this is breaking, honestly, but back in the day and in the church world especially, there was a lingering stigma around mental and emotional health. Define really what you see emotional health is and why you think that stigma persists or did persist and is lingering in the church setting.
Yeah, so the idea of health is not the absence of disease or struggle. It's the presence of flourishing. And so when I talk about emotional health, that fits within a larger context of my soul health, the way I think, my mind, my will, the way I make decisions, and my emotional states. We were talking about this back there. This is not my quote, but I'd give credit
this
where
is
credit
good.
was due.
Write it down.
But emotions are amazing consultants, terrible CEOs. Amazing consultants.
I'm going to preach a whole series on that right there.
Yeah.
That is
terrible CEOs. So when you talk about emotional health is couched within the context of holistic health because it all plays we don't have time to go into this. It all plays a role. So when you think about the flourishing of your emotional life, that is your ability to recognize or be aware of your experiences, not ignore them. It is not spiritual to deny the reality of an experience. I've had people say, I'm not depressed. Well, you're not getting out of bed and you hadn't bathed in 4 days.
Yeah.
It's like, or I'm not anxious, or, I'm not sick. And it's like, well, I understand what people are trying to do. They think acknowledgement is agreement. We've got to be able to acknowledge or be aware of our internal world.
Yes.
But know who we're agreeing with.
Yes.
And it's not the experience. Emotional health is our capacity to have the courage to face ourselves, be aware of my thought life, my behavioral tendencies. I want to karate chop you in the throat right now. Oh, you're laughing. Anybody watching Cobra Kai? Yeah. I hear my 11-year-old upstairs, hi-ya, hi-ya. And I'm thinking, I'm just glad I don't hear my wife in there going, hi-ya, hi-ya. She's preparing. But I married a feisty Italian woman. She's 4'12".
You've been sitting on that joke a while. That was good.
While,
I like that.
Oh no, my wife, she'd be laughing right now if she was on the front row. But I'm losing. Okay, awareness. We've got to be aware of those experiences, even what's going on in our bodies, because our bodies are so connected. We've already established it's important. Then I've got to be able to regulate that experience, calm myself down, deep breathing work, calming my body down, because as I regulate, it brings the attention or the functioning back to the area of my brain that helps me have clarity and think more clearly. And by the way, your ability to be aware of and regulate an experience is the seat of authority. God cares more about your authority over an unwanted experience than he does the absence of that experience in your life. Your emotional health and well-being is not about the absence of a depression or an anxiety. Our focus is what ultimately, in the present, is what typically fulfills the reality of our future. And so I'm not saying we don't deal with the struggle. I'm saying we've got to know how to be aware of what's going on, regulate it so that we can do the third thing, and that's understand it. So if I'm angry, I don't shove that anger. I bring that anger to the table like we're sitting here. And so if you're my angry part, I go, what's going on with you? Well, anger is a sign that a boundary line's been crossed, a value has been violated, or an expectation wasn't met. And if I'm not listening to my anger, I can't invite the Holy Spirit in for the wisdom I need to know what's actually going on. Right? I used to be afraid of my anger. I've broken my hand twice punching stuff, especially as an athlete. And so I just started shoving it for years. And so over the last several years of my life, I'm trying to practice what I preach. And the more I listen to my anger, I'm not afraid of my anger anymore. I can feel angry and not act from it, which sounds pretty biblical, doesn't it? Yeah. Right? And so, and the fourth thing of emotional health and maturity, I'm aware of what's going on. I regulate it. I can start to really understand what's happening. Then I can respond, not react. And that response is rooted in my identity, my value systems. Who do I want to be, right? And God's call on my life and on the authority that he's actually given me. But the problem with the stigma piece of this, which the stigma means a mark of shame or disgrace, is that so many times we have exiled the parts of us that we hate because we think if I'm struggling, I don't have faith. And that's not true. It just means you're human.
Yes.
Right? Yes. So, in fact, a mark of a lack of faith is your ability to bring that part of you don't like to the table.
Wow.
Yeah, I love you. I'm just saying it. Faith is being able to bring all of who we are to the table and go, God, what do you want to say to me about this part? But there's a stigma sometimes that, one, it means I don't have faith. Two, it means I've got to be vulnerable. And that's true. You do have to be vulnerable. And we don't know what to do with the strength of our emotions sometimes, and so we shove them down. And I also think there's not a theology of suffering in the church. We think that if I suffer, God's not with me, he's not for me. But understanding the theology of suffering, we start to see suffering in a different way in our lives, and it transforms it to be fuel for our sanctification, not a bomb for our destruction. And so we're able to lean in a way that fosters that health. And I would say as a church culture, this is the invitation from your pastors. You don't have to run away from the parts of you that you don't like. You can invite them to the table and let it be a part of your sanctification. It doesn't have to be.
Can I say one thing on that? I think that is, as a Christian community, and we're spiritual, but to hide from reality is not beneficial. And to characterize something as spiritual that is not spiritual. And Christians are good about that. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe you're afraid to deal with it, and so we put that label on it so we don't have to actually face it. Is that kind of what you're saying a little bit?
Yeah, take Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus, if you want to know how much Jesus loves you, I may tear up saying this, we don't just have the cross, we have the garden. Jesus was so stressed out that he was experiencing hematidrosis, where the blood vessels under his skin were exploding. That's how much stress he was carrying. He had a part of his soul that tried to talk him out of going to the cross 3 times. Is there another way? Is there another way? Is there another way? That wasn't sin. It wasn't demonic. He was scared to death. But he led those parts well for the joy that was set before him, for the glory of the Father, and for our salvation and relationship with him. So Jesus Amen. Jesus understands the reality of our parts and our struggle. And he models how to lead that well. So yeah, I hope that just connected, yeah.
Okay, just to tag off of what you're talking about, and I don't want to spend too much time because we've got really good questions coming, but if emotions are God-given, how do we move from avoiding or dismissing them to embracing and stewarding them in a healthy way?
Yeah. So number one was we have to be curious. Curiosity fosters healthy confession. And confession is not just about sin. The scriptures say we hold fast to the confession of our hope. The word confession means just to acknowledge, basically. And so if I'm curious about my own thought life, about my own emotional states, if I'm curious, I'm now able to lean in. I'm not judging myself. I'm not putting myself in a box. That's what judgments do. When we judge another person, we judge that person by putting them in the box of our judgment, and they can never get out of the box that we put them in. But we do that to ourselves too. Oh, I don't have enough faith. You put yourself in the box of faithlessness or whatever. But the more that we can get curious about things, it takes us out of that box, and we're able to see all of the different parts of who we are like people. If I've got a part that's afraid.
I was going to say, what would a part be?
Yeah, so if I have let me give you an example. Every time I do something like this, I have a part of me. A part, it doesn't make up all of who I am. It's just a part of me. Yeah. And that parts need to be sanctified. So I have a part of me that says, you don't know what you're doing, you're going to make a fool of yourself. You're going to get on the platform, and you're going to start talking, and people are going to realize you're a fraud. Wow. I have a part every single time I do this. Well, the more I listen to that part, I could call it demonic, and maybe it is, but I've realized through the years that's just a part of my soul that's trying to protect me from embarrassment. And because if I embarrass myself as Dr. Yarborough, then I impact my capacity to provide for my family. But listen, the more that I've learned that about myself, the more I can go, hey, thank you for trying to protect me, but my mission is more important than my insecurity. Wow. This is real stuff, guys. Like this impact, like my fear of provision is a faith issue for me that I need to just trust the Lord. And so I'm going to keep doing every time God calls, and that's what he's prepping me for. But I'm not afraid of that part of me anymore. It's just a part of my soul that's trying to protect me, and Jesus understands that. And I know a lot of you are hearing this, and you're like, yeah, that makes sense to me too. And so I think that's how we steward these emotional states. As we get curious, we lean in. We are aware of, we can regulate, we begin to understand, and then we respond out of our mission, out of our vision. And again, keep in mind, your health is not about the absence of an insecurity, the absence of a depression or an anxiety or a trauma. It's about your capacity to continue to develop an authority over it. And we find over time that it's not the absent. Think about the kingdom: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. Those are the fruits that start to show up as you focus your pursuit on his presence and on authority.
And I feel like I don't know if this is just me or if I see this a lot or my mind, I don't know. But I think sometimes people can use that part of them, well, that's just who I am, as an excuse to behave a certain way and justify certain behavior. But what you're saying is the power is in the authority over that part of you. And you can't use it as an excuse. You have to invite it to the table and deal with it head on. And when you deal with it head on is when you have authority over it. Yeah.
So an excuse sounds like this: well, that's just who I am. An explanation sounds like this: man, there's a part of me that really struggles with that, but I'm working to get authority over it. Excuses and explanations can sound a lot alike. But excuses move us away from responsibility. Explanations foster an understanding so that we can take appropriate responsibility. Man, there's so much we could get into with that with communication, but I'm going to reel it on back.
Reel it in.
Yeah.
Okay, so we often hear that we're supposed to love one another, and we are. I believe that. But in this day and age, life is moving at such a rapid speed. There's so much pressure and stressors that we have on our life. How do we effectively love one another, and not specifically my spouse, when I have just had an incredibly difficult day at work? She's had an incredibly difficult day at work. I've had to fight Mopac traffic to get home. You don't know what that is, but be grateful. Or just be glad.
I feel a lot of gratitude right now.
Yeah. So, and I, just the pressures and the stresses that I have on me. How do I make sure that we nurture and practice that self-leadership consistently so that I can show up well for her on a consistent basis? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Love the Lord your God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. As yourself isn't some self-indulgent reality. What that actually means is, in the same way that you would care for your own basic needs, your dignity, justice, that's the way that you love other people. And relationships are mirrors. The identity is an objective reality, but it's also a social construct. We do not know who we are apart from the relationships in which we see ourselves. And so as I'm stewarding everything that we just talked about with health, I hope I'm answering your question here, but I've got as we're stewarding everything we just talked about, and we're taking responsibility for ourselves, then I am able to reflect back to my spouse the objective reality of who he or she is, and not from my brokenness or my pain. Does that make sense? And it allows us to connect. Love in the scriptures there's a lot of different words, Greek words for love, right? But all of those words contextualize love. They do not define it. Brotherly love, like romantic love, they contextualize it. Well, there's a researcher named Barbara Fredrickson out of the University of North Carolina. She has the best definition of love that I've personally heard, because it underlies every single aspect of love, including for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. And it actually starts with connection. Love is making these micro moments, these small moments of connection that foster shared positive emotions. Micro moments of connection that foster shared positive emotions. Hang with me here. Negative emotions in marriage put you in survival states. That's what negative emotions do, like anxiety, fear. All I see is through the lens of survival. Positive emotions, I'm not in survival anymore. I'm being positioned to thrive. And so positive emotions then broaden my perspective so I can see that part of my spouse I don't like is just a part of her. It's not all of her. My spouse is freaking amazing. Mel's got all these amazing qualities of who she is. That one part doesn't define her. And so these small moments of connection that foster shared positive emotion increase a synchrony of biochemistry and behavior. Literally, your bodies sync. Oxytocin, vasopressin, dopamine, serotonin. It's the underlying neurophysiology of human attachment. And as that takes place, these connections, this positivity, we're connected, we start do things together. I text you, she texts me, hey, how's your day? Whatever. It fosters a belief of mutual care. I am for you and you are for me. The reason that a lot of marriage counseling doesn't work is you go get a lot of really good skills, but you never deal with the heart belief that my spouse isn't for me. That core heart belief will sabotage your efforts. And the way that you start to change it is in the micro moments of connection. And let me say this too about commitment. Commitment is unbelievable because it establishes safety and security, okay? But commitment only helps you survive. It does not help you thrive. Connection with each other, responding to what researchers call emotional bids, just the daily little bids that we give each other for connection. And this is true for parenting, it's true for friendships, but the daily, weekly bids, I'm gonna respond. Healthy marriages, 86% of the time respond to each other well. Divorced couples, 33%. Commitment will give you a sense of stability, but it is the connection that ultimately helps you thrive. And you have to have both.
Yeah.
Previous generations, older generations value commitment. We struggle to connect. Our current generation, if you're in your 30s, or early 40s, 30s, your 20s, you're involved in a culture that values connection.
Say it. Say it.
And you will do anything it takes for connection. You will have sex with people. You will give your body, your emotions, your finances, everything to feel that strong connection, because that's what you think gives you security. But what's happening is you're giving all of who you are, forming a human biological attachment. And the reason that your generations live in constant anxious attachment is because there's zero commitment. So you don't have the foundation of security, stability.
Woo!
That's why we go from relationship to relationship to relationship, seeking for the emotional high, because the high connection feels like commitment for a while. It's not going to sustain you. We got to have both.
Woo!
And that's exactly what Jesus does for us. I will never leave you or forsake you.
Yes.
I will never leave you. And there's a constant invitation for connection.
Okay.
God.
Sorry.
No.
We'll keep going.
Brain is tired, y'all. Okay, so but what you're saying is, and I don't want to hear, I don't want the younger generation to hear that as an attack on you,
Right.
because the reverse is true. It's also why we have couples that have been married for 30 years that are roommates.
Yes. Yeah.
Because they value commitment and no connection, and it just explains the necessity for both. To have a healthy relationship, you gotta have both. And what you hit on this Friday night, and it's funny because you made us do an exercise, which was great, because nobody really answered that they were uncomfortable, but they were, I promise you. But one of the things you had us do was talk about those micro moments of connection. And I think that was so powerful. It was so helpful for Cassidy and I, because what I found out that night, that there is something that's been a part of our marriage for years that was such a micro moment of connection for her that I had no idea. And so because I had no idea, I'm tempted, it was ignorance, but I'm tempted to shove it off as unimportant. And when I didn't feel like having that moment of connection, it was really easy for me to hold her at arm's length because I didn't value it. I didn't know she valued it. But now that I know that is one of those micro moments, and it's not, those moments are probably more important than the Valentine's dates where you're sitting at a restaurant with 8,000 other people and they packed you in like a bunch of rats with a preset menu and you're like, sorry.
It's simple. It's the simple things that...
But the importance of that, how important those moments are to create the connection that we crave and need for healthy relationships.
And if I can't connect with myself and lead myself well, how am I going to do that with my spouse, my kids, and so on?
Okay, let's get in. We got one more kind of deep that we need to get in before you go beat everybody else to the restaurants.
Yes.
Okay, we're good. We got a couple minutes. We're good.
No,
okay.
this is good. Okay, so I want to talk about we're talking about healthy relationships, healthy marriages, but the truth is, in the crowd this size, we understand that not everyone in this room is representing a healthy, thriving marriage. There are people in the room that have broken relationships that they're working through because trust has been lost. And trust is a massive component in any relationship, but what happens when trust has been broken? How do you begin the journey of rebuilding trust?
Okay. Your cheeks are gonna flap in the wind here. Just saying, we're gonna move through this. Trust is not all or nothing. Trust exists in every key area of life, spiritually, psychologically, physically, relationally, environmentally, lifestyle and habits, finances, leadership, in every area. But when you have broken trust in one or more of those areas, there's a Dr. Brene Brown wrote a book called Braving the Wilderness. And braving she uses as an acronym for trust. And we've tweaked it a little bit, but I think it's one of the most powerful frameworks to be able to assess how to rebuild trust. The B stands for boundaries.
Get a little twitch.
Yep. Boundaries, we don't want to use boundaries as weapons.
Yeah.
I see that all the time. But boundaries are tools for self-care so I can steward my health to forgive and to continue to connect as that's possible, okay? People don't have to like your boundaries as long as they respect your boundaries. If they respect your boundaries, it increases the likelihood you're moving towards trust. The R in braving stands for reliability and responsibility. Do what you say you're going to do. If you want to rebuild trust, follow through on your word in the little things. Follow through. And then when you make a mistake, take responsibility for it. The people who are reliable and the people who take responsibility increases the likelihood that you can be trusted. So in those areas. The A stands for accountability. Accountability is the social aspect of reliability, okay? Most of us don't like accountability, right? I've got 4 accountability partners that know everything about me. Everything. And they like me still most of the time. But you don't have to like accountability to value it. If somebody doesn't want accountability, why? They can't be trusted. I've worked with couples before where the offending spouse was like, I need my privacy. I'm keeping my passwords. It's like, you can keep your privacy or you can keep your marriage. And sometimes boundaries need to be overcorrected, and then we can come off of them after a while. But accountability is crucial. The V stands for vault and vulnerability. Vault is, dude, you keep a secret.
So good.
A lot of times when we're hurt, we let too many people in our vault. And the damage that's done from spewing our pain increases the problems we have later. Let the right people into your, I'm not saying don't tell people. You just got to let the right people into your vault. And the vulnerability piece is being able to show up even when you can't control the outcome. So if I'm a vault and I'm telling the right people and I'm willing to be vulnerable, it increases the likelihood I can be trusted. I stands for integrity. And integrity has 2 definitions. One is being willing to do the right thing to the best of your ability even when no one is watching. That's number 1. But the second is integrity means wholeness. Wholeness. And so if I am not taking responsibility for my brokenness, I can't be trusted. I can be loved, but I can't be trusted because I'll act out of my brokenness. And we're all broken. That's not the issue. The issue with trust is, am I willing to take responsibility for my brokenness? So if the person that's rebuilding trust takes ownership for the brokenness, it increases the likelihood they can be trusted. The N means non-judgment. Non-judgment. I'm not judging you or putting you in the box of a judgment, but I am willing to make judgments about the health of a behavior. You may not like me because I make judgments about the health of a behavior, but you can trust me as long as I'm not putting you in the box of a judgment. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You're an idiot. Yeah. Well, I just put you in the box. There's no way you can get out of the box that I just put you in. Right? So I've got to take responsibility to judge the health of the behavior. And if you've got people in your life that are doing that, they can be trusted. And the last is generosity. Sorry.
No, so I think that is so powerful, that somebody can speak to the reality of a behavior and they're not judging your character. They're not disliking you.
Right.
They're calling out. They're saying it because they love you. Don't look at it as them, putting you in a box. They want you to be as healthy as you can be, and that's why they're calling out this behavior. And I think the importance of understanding that for whatever friendship, relationship, marriage is so important, that if somebody calls me to the carpet on something, they're not judging me. Like, I know if Cassidy calls me out on something, it may tick me off, and I'll be like, what? You're wrong. But I know she's coming from a place that you talked about, that I know she's got my best interest at heart. And so I need to take this and I need to evaluate this. Maybe it's an insecurity that I have. Anyways, finish. I'm sorry.
Well, partners call out behavior. Yeah. People who are against you call out your character. And that may be a bit of an overstatement. But like if you're calling your husband a narcissist, you're just a narcissist. Well, maybe he is, but the likelihood is you're just dealing with a rigid part that's trying to protect him from something. But speak to the behavior, avoid the judgment. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And then the G stands for generosity. And there's 2 kinds of generosity that build trust. It's when we give with no strings attached, or when we give with very clear expectations. Hey, I'm going to still give you relationship, but I need these boundaries in place. That's generosity with expectation. And, I think the clearest person that demonstrates this is God. It's Jesus. He shows up in every single area of our lives and just simply says, come. Like, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden. And let me say this last thing and we're done. One of the most powerful reasons that we can trust Jesus is because when we come to him, we're not performing to earn anything. We're positioning to receive what he showed up and earned on our behalf. And so there's no pressure. There's no work. There's no condemnation here. I know we talked about some heavy things, but the reality of it is, if you feel conviction, that's the love of the Father. But there's zero condemnation. We just position ourselves to receive and let what he does in us flow into our marriages, our parenting, and our community around us.
Powerful.